There's perhaps not a season of television that has as many iconic episodes as the third season of Avatar: The Last Airbender. While the second season may be the more cohesive one, there are just so many episodes in the last 21 that you can make an entire video about. And as you can probably tell by the title of this video, today we're going to be talking about one of the last episodes before the finale and the last of Zuko's field trips, the Southern Raiders. In this video, we're going to go through the episode and talk about how it uses some massively impressive action sequences and emotional storytelling to deliver one of the most poignant messages in the entire series.
Okay, I'm not crushed. You can get off me now.
I'll take that as a thank you.
The episode starts off with a peaceful morning at the Western Air Temple being interrupted by a Fire Nation raid. I love some of the camera stuff they do at the beginning of this one, as the shakiness fully establishes the peril of the scene and the music helps add to this effect. While a good chunk of this scene seems like unrelated exposition to the bulk of this episode, there is some stuff to take note of, besides the obvious Katara being unappreciative of Zuko saving her life. Zuko fully takes responsibility for repelling the raid, and we get to see Azula for what ends up being the precursor to their Agni Kai in the finale. The Azula of this episode is fresh off the betrayal of Ty Lee and Mai in the last episode, and is now fully reveling in the opportunity to send her brother to his early grave. While this fantastic fight is going on, we get a touching but rushed scene with the rest of the gang splitting up, as Appa doesn't like tunnels or something. Really, this just seems like the show wanting to get the cast back to just the main characters before the finale, but the themes of family separation here obviously come back later in the episode. The fight between the siblings continues after this, as we get a really well choreographed fight, again showing the duality of the pair. Even the ending of the fight does this, as both characters fall and are saved in different ways. Zuko is saved by his friends, and Azula is saved by her own ability. Either way, after this ridiculously cool shot of Azula, we don't see her again until the finale, with Zuko's efforts against her being fully celebrated by the rest of Team Avatar. Well, almost the rest of Team Avatar, as Katara continues to be less than receptive to Zuko's friendliness. The scene around the campfire is a mix of comedy and tension, as it just feels like Katara is getting ready to snap. And when Zuko follows her after she storms out, that's exactly what happens. The writing in this scene does a really good job portraying the anger and confusion in Katara without dipping too far into irrationality, as she establishes both the outer reason she's upset with Zuko, him betraying her at Ba Sing Se, and the inner reason she's upset with him, the fact that she sees him as a representative of the Fire Nation, the same Fire Nation that took her mother. It's easy to sympathize with both characters here, as while Katara has every right to still be upset that everybody is being so accepting of Zuko's second sudden alliance switch, it makes sense that Zuko would want Katara to stop treating him as if he was still trying to capture Aang. After this Katara outburst, Zuko goes and interrupts Suki and Sokka's hangout session and tells Sokka both that he doesn't know why Katara is mad at him and exactly why Katara is mad at him.
Your sister, she hates me. And I don't know why, but I want you to tell me what happened to your mother. She's connected her anger about that to her anger at me.
Besides this slight contradiction though, this scene does highlight the strengthened bond between Sokka and Zuko after the events of the last episode, and of course leads us into the first retelling of the events of the Southern Water Tribe raid. This first retelling comes from Sokka's point of view, and besides just giving us some adorably young versions of the Water Tribe siblings, doesn't give us a whole lot of information regarding what actually happened to Sokka's mother. We instead get to see the Water Tribe fight off the Fire Nation before an oddly quick retreat from the Fire Nation, as if they got what they wanted. The chaos in this scene is portrayed well too, as the waterbendingless Water Tribe fights in a way that we don't see a ton of in this series. We're gonna get more of this scene later, but first we get Zuko announcing the goal of the episode and one of the best line deliveries in the series that is admittedly somewhat ruined by the show getting a bit overzealous with the dramatic music.
I know who killed your mother, and I'm going to help you find him.
Anyway, the full announcement of this episode's sick premise leads us into the second half of the episode, with Zuko and Katara wanting to immediately chase after the latter's mother's killer. This leads to a confrontation with Aang and what is perhaps the best written dialogue of the entire episode. The scene begins to lay out the episode's themes of forgiveness and revenge versus justice, and all four characters take part in an emotion-filled bloodbath of a conversation. I mean, there's a lot you can dive into here. Katara insinuates that Sokka didn't didn't love their mother enough to care about her death, which is really messed up, but the end of the conversation is what I want to focus on for a second.
It's easy to do nothing, but it's hard to forgive.
It's not just hard. It's impossible.
Despite Aang's best efforts, this moment clearly indicates that Katara has already made up her mind on exactly what she has to do. In her head, it's impossible to ever live happily if the man who killed her mother gets to do the same. This sentiment is proved as she and Zuko attempt to leave at night despite Aang's wishes. And when Aang catches them in the act, Katara doesn't even flinch, further showing her hyper-focus on her one goal. Aang relents and decides to let them take Appa, giving Katara some advice about forgiving her mother's killer, which she doesn't even pretend to listen to. After a beautiful shot of Appa flying against the moon, we get to see even more evidence of this, as Katara uncharacteristically wants to recklessly, quote, bust into the communication tower, while Zuko has to remind her that if they get caught, their whole mission will be ruined. Luckily for the audience, Zuko wins out here, which means that we get to see some ridiculously fun ninja sequences in this episode, as this short scene is filled with some really creative moments. The scene back atop Appa is really fantastic too, albeit in a completely different way, as Katara begins to show resentment for her inability to help her mother on her final day, which leads us to the second retelling of the Southern Water Tribe raid, this time from the perspective of Katara. This time around we get to see the beginnings of what happened inside of Katara's home, as the show makes sure to put special emphasis on the face of the killer. We also get to hear the beginning of a conversation between Kaya, Katara's mother, and the man, although we don't get the ending until much later in the episode. For now, we go back to Appa, where Katara is seemingly able to sleep now that she's told Zuko about the events of her mother's death, as if she had been holding on to it for too long. A little bit of time passes as we get to the raid on the Southern Raiders' ship. From the beginning of this scene, Katara's devotion to her task emanates, as she throws armored men into the sea with little regard for their safety. The show does make sure to show that these soldiers can still somehow swim, as if it was especially important to not have Katara take any lives on the way to find who she's looking for. After making quick work of anybody unfortunate enough to still be on the ship, Katara and Zuko make it to the captain, when Katara does exactly what she promised to never do again, bloodbend. If there's a better way to show how blind she's become towards everything else but finding her mother's killer, then I don't know what it is, as this scene is perfectly viscerally uncomfortable to watch, both from the obvious uncomfortable bloodbending and from Katara deviating so far from her moral compass. Even Zuko seems to be shocked by what's transpiring in front of him, but he quickly shakes it off. Katara bloodbends to get a good look at the man that she's been hunting for her entire life, only to discover that she's got the wrong guy. She quickly turns from him and Zuko to hide her tears, and Zuko gets the captain to reveal the name of who they're actually looking for, the retired Southern Raiders captain, Yon-Ra. After this reveal, the episode cuts to show us a peek into the life of Yon-Ra, where the horrifying captain is revealed to just be an old man living with his mother and tending to his garden. As we see more of his day, the emphasis of the scene becomes clear. We never actually see him do anything to live up to his bad guy status, or anything to show that he's actually a good guy. He's just a guy. The collection of scenes as Katara and Zuko stalk him are shot like a horror movie where Yon-Ra is the protagonist, as the camera is always peeking over something. Finally, we get a glimpse of Katara, who refers to Yon-Ra as a monster right before confronting him. After a little bit of prodding, Yon-Ra eventually admits to recognizing Katara, which leads to the third and final retelling of Kaya's death, this one finally giving us all the information. It's revealed here that the reason that Kaya was killed was because she took the fall for being the last waterbender in the tribe, furthering Katara's self-blame for her mother's death. This scene does a really good job being terrifying, as the contrast between Yon-Ra's face telling Kaya she's going to die against his face as he believes that he is going to die is incredibly striking. Katara begins to prepare an awe-inspiring attack to take out Yon-Ra, but then, in the moment before she pulls the trigger, she sees him for what he is. He's not the monster she wants him to be, he's, as she puts it,
There's just nothing inside you. Nothing at all.
Katara doesn't find the evil villain that she can place all of her anger on in Yon-Ra. What she instead finds is an empty vessel, one that has been used by a larger entity to commit an evil act, and just simply didn't have the courage to disobey. This realization stuns Katara, as she's unable to finish what she came to do, inadvertently sparing Yan-Ra to weep as her and Zuko depart, taking us to the final scene of the episode on the dock. Katara tells Aang about her inability to kill Yan-Ra, and asking whether or not she was too weak to finish the job, or strong enough to not have to. Aang reassures her that she did the right thing, and that it was important that she forgave him, but then she reassures Aang that she didn't. Katara never forgives Yan-Ra, completely flipping this episode's obvious forgiveness theme on its head. The episode doesn't really focus on this at all, as Katara moves on to forgiving Zuko in the same sentence, but I do want to stay on this for at least a second. It's really interesting that the show chooses to emphasize that you can move past something without actually forgiving. No longer holding active resentment and anger towards an individual is not the same as actually forgiving them, and I think this episode does a really great job illustrating that, even if it doesn't seem like it's terribly concerned about emphasizing it itself. The end of this one sets up the core moral question of the finale, as Zuko asks Aang,
Violence wasn't the answer.
It never is.
What are you gonna do when you face my father?
When you hear people discussing what the best episodes of the series are, you hardly hear people bring up this one, which has always surprised me. Maybe it's because it's the epitome of the Katara bringing up her dead mother meme, but I've always held this episode in as high regard as any other in the series. Being the last standard episode in the show before the recap episode and the finale, it wraps up Katara's arc with her mother in a way that fully tackles the topics of revenge and justice, both in a way that serves Katara and Zuko's relationship and in a way that helps set up the upcoming finale. Whether it's the gut-wrenching conversations, the beautifully animated sequences, or the interesting takes on forgiveness or the effect of war on the weak, there's always something to love when you rewatch The Southern Raiders. Anyway, that's just about gonna be it for me. If you have a show or episode or concept or literally anything you want me to cover, let me know in the comments or find me on Twitter. Either way, this has been AmpleSamuel, and I'll see you in some unit of time. Thanks for watching.